Do you have a bunch of old stuff just piling up in your garage or storage space? Well, don't get rid of anything just yet, because with a little paint and creativity, you can turn your junk into useful and beautiful outdoor decor. In today's video, I'll be upcycling several items that were just collecting dust in my garage and using them to spruce up my yard and front porch. So gather up your junk and let's get started.
My garage is currently full of stuff I intend to throw away or donate. So, as I contemplated the topic for this week's video, I decided to see what outdoor decor I could make from this pile of junk. I started with this piano bench. You can't tell, but one of the legs is badly split. After a thorough cleaning with liquid sandpaper, I sprayed both the inside and the outside of the bench with some red chalk paint. It took 3 coats and just about the entire can of paint. Next, I marked with a pencil where I wanted to drill, and then I drilled 3 small holes on the inside of the lid and screwed in cup hooks. I ran some twine through the holes in the handles of my gardening tools and hung them from the hooks. A plastic dish tub fit in the seat perfectly to hold my potting soil. Next, I chose this large magazine rack from the pile. I originally thrifted it because I loved the pretty fretwork, but after a few years, I still hadn't used it. So I thought I might try turning it into a pretty planter. I would need to remove the wood dividers so that plants could fit inside. And I found that if I cut the dividers first with my jigsaw, that the dividers popped out much more easily. I used wood filler to disguise the holes that were left where the dividers had been on the inside. I let the wood fill completely dry and then sanded it smooth with my orbital sander. Before painting, I cleaned the magazine rack really well with liquid sandpaper. This was such a nice piece. I knew that I didn't want to distress it, so I painted it with 2 coats of an acrylic enamel paint in a light aqua color. For the next project, I grabbed 4 old window shutters. 2 of them were still hinged together, so I removed the hinges. You might remember from a previous video that I used one of these shutters as a bath tray, so some of the louvers were missing and it had been painted white. The shutters were tall and skinny, and I thought they would be a good size for a plant stand. I arranged the 4 shutters into a box shape and used my brad nailer to attach the shutters together. I took 3 of the divider pieces that I had removed from the magazine rack and cut them to the same length with my miter saw so that they fit nicely over the top of the shutter stand. Then I used my brad nailer to nail the wood slats into the top edge of the shutters. I sanded the wood slats down to the natural wood. Next, I painted the shutters with a coat of white Zinsser primer, and when the primer was dry, I sprayed the shutters with leafy green spray paint. Since some of the louvers were already missing, I just embraced the rustic look and went ahead and distressed the shutters with my orbital sander. I did spray on a coat of clear satin polyurethane to make it more weather resistant. This faux topiary had been in my garage for a long time and had definitely seen better days. The first order of business in trying to save this topiary was to unwind and remove all of the fake faded ivy vine. Next, I needed to remove all of the dusty, viney stuff that had been shoved inside the metal frame. It was so dirty and dusty, so at this point I just sprayed down the whole thing with the garden hose to clean it up. I know some of you think I should have repainted the pot, but I just really liked its aged appearance, so I left it. Once it was dry, I began wrapping the frame with some wired leaf vine that I had ordered from Amazon. I bought over 250 feet for just $10, and because I wanted a more sparse look, I only used about half of it. Since the garland is wired, it's very easy to wrap and arrange how you like, and you don't have to add anything additional to hold it in place. When I was done, I made a nest with some of the vine that I had previously removed and added a bird and some eggs and wired it to the tree. Have you heard the phrase, art imitates life? Well, my front door wreath proves that sometimes life imitates art. I think I need to make a birdhouse. You might remember that in a previous video, I turned an old wall mailbox into a planter. So let's see if this time I can turn it into a birdhouse. First, I sanded off any loose paint and then spray painted just the lid with leafy green spray paint, covering the rest of the mailbox with a plastic sack. I drilled 2 holes in the front of the mailbox using a spade drill bit, and then sanded the edges of the holes smooth. I rolled up a piece of sandpaper so that I could get to the inside edges better. Next, I covered the lid with a plastic bag and sprayed the main part of the box with a rust deterrent white spray paint. Once the paint was dry, I used Gorilla Glue to attach a fairy door to the front of the mailbox between the 2 holes. To frame the holes and make them look like little windows, I glued some scraps of wood and popsicle sticks around the holes. I just cut them to size using my miter shears. And then to make them look like shutters and window boxes, I painted them with green and brown acrylic paints. I had some miniature fencing in my stash and used some more Gorilla Glue to attach the fencing along the front of the mailbox below the windows. I put a couple books on top of the fencing to weigh it down until the glue had thoroughly dried. When the green acrylic paint was dry, I used a Sharpie marker to draw some shutter louvers onto the little pieces of wood. And as a final touch, I hot glued some tiny flowers into each window box. This was all I had originally planned, but I thought this little bird cottage needed some fish scale shingles along the roof line. To create the scalloped shingles, I used my miter shears to cut the ends off of several large popsicle sticks, and then used Gorilla Glue to attach them to the mailbox. I applied 1 row of shingles along the top edge of the mailbox body and a second row to the lip of the lid. I couldn't decide. What do you guys think? Should I have painted the shingles? I also hot glued some of my leftover leaf garland along the bottom of the fence and around the door. I just ran some rope through the 2 holes on the back side of the mailbox to hang it from a tree branch. I originally thrifted this old coat rack because I liked the unusual little arms, but most of them were missing, so it couldn't really hold much. I knocked off the 3 remaining arms and lightly sanded over the pole and its stand. Then I drilled holes where all the arms had originally been located, drilling so that the hole angled downward. I added a good amount of wood glue into the holes and then inserted branches from my yard into the drilled holes. I used pruners to cut the branches to my desired length and just kept adding branches until all the holes were filled. This is truly a coat tree. I've had this little table so long that I don't even remember where it came from, and it doesn't have much life left. So I thought I would just go ahead and plant some small flowers in the drawer. I cut down an old pot liner to fit inside the drawer and added some rose moss and a little potting soil. I've always called this plant rose moss, but I'm curious, do some of you call it moss rose? This bench is another piece of thrift store furniture that I've had for a long time. I previously ripped off the fabric with plans to reupholster it. You can tell from the batting and the horsehair padding just how old this bench is. I used pliers and the claw on a small hammer to remove the remaining upholstery tacks and horsehair. Then I gave it a good scrubbing with liquid sandpaper. I find that liquid sandpaper does a better job of removing grease and grime and preparing a piece of furniture to receive paint than just a traditional all-purpose cleaner. Because I wasn't planning on distressing this piece, I painted the legs with a good quality acrylic enamel paint in a light blue-green shade. Luckily, it only took 2 coats to cover this dark wood. Since I was planning to use this bench outdoors, I didn't add any new upholstery to the seat. Instead, I used furniture refinisher and some very fine steel wool to clean up the original wood slats. I love the aged look of the slats. In fact, I think this turned out so pretty, I may use it indoors. Here is yet another thrift store table that I purchased and never used. The top piece is very heavy, so I think that it's made from a paving stone. To prepare it for paint, I gave the tabletop and the metal legs a light sanding. The tabletop design was divided into fourths, each about the size of a large tile, so I decided to emphasize the tile look. I cut out squares of tissue paper to fit each of the 4 squares on the tabletop. Then I adhered them by brushing Mod Podge onto the tabletop and then carefully pressing my tissue paper into the Mod Podge, smoothing out any wrinkles with my fingers. I also applied thin strips of the tissue paper to the four edges of the table. Because tissue paper is so thin, it takes on the texture of the tabletop. I left a little gap between each piece of tissue paper and then applied a bead of caulk along that line to give the appearance of mortar. Then I painted the iron legs with an acrylic enamel paint in a light blue color to coordinate with the tissue paper. Once everything was dry, I sealed the table with a couple coats of a spray clear satin polyurethane. I'm really pleased with how today's projects turned out, and I hope you'll let me know which one was your favorite. Thank you so much for watching today, and if you love a good thrift flip, here's another video I think you may like.